Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast aimed at intermediate to advanced level English learners. What is the future of food? If we do not change the way we eat and produce food, we are going to struggle to feed the entire planet in the future and cause damage to the environment at the same time. So, what can we do? Let's discuss this issue in today's episode of Thinking in English. But first, why not follow the Thinking in English Instagram page, Thinking in English podcast, or the link is in the description, and definitely take a look at my blog, thinkinginenglish.blog, for all transcripts and some extra bonus content. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast and also on my blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Motivating. Motivating. If something is motivating, it is able to influence someone to behave in a particular way. For example, the motivating factor behind our company's success is concern for customers. Cattle. Cattle. Cattle are a group of animal that includes cows, buffalo, and bison that are often kept for their milk. For example, this farm really cares a lot about their dairy cattle. To graze. To graze. This means to eat grass, especially for animals. For instance, the cows were grazing. Sustainable. Sustainable. Able to continue over a long period of time. As in, that sort of extreme diet is not sustainable over a long period. Efficient. Efficient. Working or operating quickly and effectively in an organized way without any waste. For example, companies are building more fuel-efficient cars to save gas. Delicacy. Delicacy. Something especially rare or expensive that is good to eat. For instance, in some parts of the world, sheep brain is considered a great delicacy. To accommodate. To accommodate. To have or provide the space that someone or something needs. For instance, the center can accommodate up to 220 students. Microbe. Microbe. A very small living thing that can only be seen with a microscope. As in, it is microbes that create the unique flavor and smell of blue cheese. A few weeks ago, I talked with one of my students about her choice to be a vegetarian and her desire to eventually become vegan. She justified her decision with many different reasons, but one of the factors motivating her change in diet is the environment. I, like millions of other people around the world, enjoy eating meat. I love hamburgers and steaks, chicken, legs, everything, really. But unfortunately for us, eating meat is causing problems for our environment. Meat, and beef in particular, is one of the major factors contributing to global warming and climate change. Although we tend to underestimate how bad food production is for the environment, according to the UN's Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, the global food system is responsible for 21 to 37% of the world's greenhouse gases. Moreover, in March this year, the European Commission and the UN's Food and Agriculture Office claimed 34% of greenhouse gases in 2015 came from food. As you probably already know, greenhouse gases are one of the biggest dangers to our climate and environment, as they contribute to the warming of our planet. And as our population gets larger, it is going to become increasingly difficult to find suitable foods to feed everyone. The foods which produce the most emissions include beef, cow milk, rice, pork, chicken, and wheat, all of which are major parts of people's diets around the world. However, maybe it is not clear when I say beef is damaging to our environment. So let me try to explain how. First reason is that cattle produce a significant amount of methane, which is a damaging greenhouse gas. Farms around the world own, keep, and feed cows, which almost constantly release methane gas, into the environment. Second, in order to keep cattle and sell more beef, farmers are constantly expanding their land. By clearing forests, meadows, and woods to make fields suitable for cattle to graze, or to grow crops to feed cattle, we are losing trees and other natural ways to stop greenhouse gas emissions. Third, other factors like animal feed, processing, transport, retail, and packaging all ensure that beef is not an environmentally friendly product. In fact, beef is by far the most damaging food to the environment. Due to the size of the animals, the space needed to raise them, and the amount of methane they produce, cows produce 7 times more greenhouse gases per calorie than pigs. Beef is now being described as the coal of food production. Coal is known to be the most damaging amongst all sources of electricity, and perhaps beef is the most damaging amongst all sources of food. The simplest way to reduce the impact of beef on our environment is to eat other animals instead, or to stop eating meat altogether. However, making sure that everyone across the entire world has quality sources of protein, low carbon food, and the freedom to make their own decisions may require other major changes in our diets. I believe it is unreasonable, or perhaps even naive, to suggest that the whole world stop eating steaks and hamburgers. However, once our population reaches 9 or 10 billion in the next 50 years or so, it is going to become necessary to find new and sustainable sources of food. So, what is the future of food? I'm now going to suggest a few things that could help make our diet more sustainable, better for the environment, and still allow us to enjoy protein. However, no single one of these options is the perfect solution. But thinking about these issues will hopefully allow us to begin to change the way we eat and maybe discover solutions that could help our planet in the future. In order to feed our planet in the coming centuries, a lot is going to need to change in terms of what we eat and how we grow our food. We will need to stop wasting food and making sure that our current production methods are as efficient as possible. Furthermore, we will need to add new things to our diets, things that are more environmentally friendly, easy to produce, but not currently eaten by everyone. There are countless examples of foods that are ignored in one place, but considered a delicacy elsewhere. I think a great example is the internal organs of animals, like beef heart or chicken liver, or sea creatures, such as sea urchin or sea cucumber. While in some countries these products, these meats are incredibly popular, in other places they are very rarely eaten. Feeding 10 billion people will require rethinking what is food and what isn't food across the entire globe. As cultures, we need to change our preferences and tastes to accommodate different products. For example, Americans eat more tortilla chips than the entire world eats seaweed, despite seaweeds like kelp being incredibly healthy and much more sustainable than other crops. Many of the countries that eat the most meat actually only consume a few different species of mammals, fish, and birds. Often chicken, beef, pork, maybe sheep, so lamb, and maybe a couple of white fish, tuna, salmon, shrimp. That's probably it mainly. Perhaps we need to start eating some different things. Many scientists actually argue we should be eating more insects. In fact, already around 2 billion people choose to eat insects as part of their daily routines. In Mexico's Oaxaca, people eat grasshoppers with lime, salt, and chili. In Thailand, a common drinking snack is fried beetles. In southern Africa, people sometimes eat mopane worms. Around the rest of the world, we actually eat insects unknowingly. Insects are commonly found in vegetables, fruit, coffee, and other products, and we consume them by accident. Why eat insects, though? Well, there are a few reasons. First, they are more efficient at making protein than the animals we usually eat. Keeping insects does not require destroying forests or jungles. They release less greenhouse gases, and they can be bred at the same time as growing crops. Whereas cattle, for example, will use the field, so you cannot grow crops there. Some insects actually contain more protein per gram than meat and eggs do. So there are clearly some good reasons to eat insects, or at least to make them part of our diet. However, if you are like me, and you come from a Western country that finds the idea of insects strange or even disgusting, maybe you will be reluctant to try. Luckily for you, there is a chance we could be able to grow meat in the future. We could eat meat that was never part of an animal. Have you ever heard of lab grown meat? It is the idea of taking cells from an animal, like chicken, and then reproducing them in the laboratory to make a product that looks, smells, feels, and tastes just like chicken, but was never actually alive. As I've mentioned many times already, the market for meat and fish is increasing, but this is not sustainable. Plant based alternatives to meat are increasingly popular, but they cannot compete with steaks or chicken breasts. Growing meat in laboratories is more environmentally friendly than real meat, and it might be able to help us feed more people in the future. There are other possible solutions as well. How about microbes? Humans have been using microbes in foods for tens of thousands of years. Microbes are how we preserve cabbage in the form of kimchi or sauerkraut. They make alcohol and vinegar. They keep cured meats like sausages and hams safe to eat for months. They preserve cheese, and they form the foundation of yogurt and bread. Scientists believe that in the future, bacteria and other microbes could be designed and used to produce proteins and fats that we could incorporate into our diets. In fact, some companies are already using microbes to form the proteins in a product called Impossible Burgers. Other technology could also be developed. New ways of farming could be established, and alternatives to our everyday diets popularized. So here is today's final thought. What is the future of food? If we keep our current diet, it is likely that we will not be able to feed the future people of our planet. And even if we can, we will potentially destroy the environment at the same time. In this episode of Thinking in English, I briefly touched upon a few potential solutions to our future food crises. Adding more sustainable and environmentally friendly sources of nutrition, developing lab grown meat, or using products from microbes could all help. But what do you think? Can you think of any possible solutions to the food crisis? Are you willing to change your diet? Would you eat insects or lab grown meat or a protein from microbes if given the chance? Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast aimed at intermediate to advanced level English learners. Millions of people around the world are forced to flee their homes, abandon their belongings, and search for safety in countries far away from their own. However, there is a lot of confusion surrounding the rules, laws, and definitions of refugees and other similar people. So, in this episode of Thinking in English, let's try to answer questions like: who can be a refugee? What is the difference between a refugee, an asylum seeker, and a migrant? What protection are refugees entitled to receive? But first, why not follow the Thinking in English Instagram page, Thinking in English podcast, or the link is in the description, and check out our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog, for all of the transcripts and some extra bonus content. Here is today's vocabulary list.